Hey, what's up everybody? This is Clark from Wiped Out and I'm doing What's My Rig for Pi Records. I'm going to talk about all the gear that I use in my band Wiped Out, from guitar to amp, and just I'm going to get real nerdy with it. I'm going to really try to just like tell you exactly all the details about all the gear and why I like it, why I settled on each item. So I'm just going to get right into it. I have a really simple setup. I've always kind of been a guy that doesn't like to use pedals, especially live, because, you know, I like to rock out live and I like to just sort of be, you know, free, and I don't like to be dancing on pedals on stage. So for me, like I always just feel like pedals are just really, for the most part, just really annoying to use live. So typically I try to always keep my setup very streamlined. I think another band that does that is kind of like Low Straight Jackets. I know that they also just are sort of like, you know, guitar to amp kind of guys. So the guitar, this guitar is an American vintage 65 Jaguar. The reason that I chose it is, there's a few reasons, I guess. I love the American vintage series. It's sort of like the sweet spot, in my opinion, in Fender's reissue history. So this is like, I think from about like 2012 to 2017, Fender was doing these reissues, the American Vintage series, and they were doing year-specific models that were dialed in like super, super close to the original spec. So in my opinion, and from what everything I've read online, like those models from about like 2012 to 2017, somewhere right in there, are sort of like the most vintage correct reissues that you can really get your hands on without getting a vintage instrument or a custom shop. So that's why I like that range, and so all my guitars are from that general range. The reason why I got the Jaguar, one is just because it's a super cool classic surf guitar. I personally was always drawn more to like the Jaguar than the Jazzmaster. Something about the skinny little pickups and the short scale and the extra bits of chrome, I don't know, I just always thought it was cooler than a Jazzmaster, but I like them too. But like, for me, the Jaguar was like the surf guitar, you know? I think there are all of these other guitars that are so tied into every other genre, but a Jaguar is like the surf guitar to me. And so I wanted an American vintage model. The other one that I was considering was like a slightly earlier 62 reissue. So this is a 65 reissue. I like the 62 reissue also, but the only reason why I opted for the 65 was the binding on the neck. I don't know if you can see that on the video, but the binding on the neck, that's the one detail that really stood out to me the most between the 62 and the 65. So that was just purely an aesthetic kind of choice for me. So to get into some of the specs of the guitar, it's all very vintage accurate. So, you know, and I have the guitar just completely stock, except for this mastery bridge, which I'll get into. So if you don't know, the vintage, it's like 7 1/4 radius fretboard. This 65 Jag is like a medium C profile neck here, so kind of a little slimmer than some other of the American vintage stuff, like some of the 50s stuff. So it's a little bit slimmer, a little bit easier to play, especially with the short scale. The pickups, I guess these are 65 pickups. So I think I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that the difference between the 65 and say like the 62 is that these are gray bobbins and the other ones are black bobbins. I think that's true, and that means that they're usually a little bit janglier, a little bit more thin sounding than the 62 models. Otherwise, all stock wiring, everything like that. If you don't know, I'll go through really, really quick. This selector switch goes between the rhythm circuit and the lead circuit. So when you're up here, these controls are activated, and when you're down here, these ones are. This is sort of the muffled, jazzier, darker circuit up here. You got a volume and a tone. When you're down here, you've got individual pickup selectors, on and off switches for each one. And then you've got a strangle switch, it's called, which is sort of just like a high pass filter. It takes off some of the low end when you have it engaged. And then your normal volume and tone. The mastered bridge, like I said, was the only thing that is not completely stock on this guitar. I decided to switch it out because I had the stock one. I never really had a lot of issues with it. I know it's like a huge thing with offset guitars. Everyone always has so many issues with it. I didn't have a lot of issues with it, but I was at a rehearsal one day, and I was kind of, really doing the double picking thing, like, that kind of stuff. But when I was doing that, and kind of really going crazy, I had a saddle on here that just completely flipped over, and then one of the little screws popped out and I lost the screw. And I could have fixed it, but it was just kind of one of those things where the band was starting to play out more and starting to play live more, and I just couldn't risk having that kind of thing happen at a live show and just be completely like handicapped in that situation. So I needed something that was going to be reliable and not do that to me. So I just went with the Mastery. It gives it much sturdier of a feel. You don't feel as, you can go as hard as you want with your right hand, and you won't ever pop a string out. You won't ever feel that bridge moving around. It's super solid. So that's this guitar. This is the guitar. I think Wiped Out has released 10 songs. I've done all of the records with this guitar. I've played all of our shows with this guitar. So this is definitely like the Wiped Out guitar. But I wanted to talk a little bit about one more guitar while I'm here. So the other guitar that I think about using sometimes for Wiped Out, but I haven't really yet. I think that's going to change soon, because I think I'm going to start bringing this to some gigs and maybe using it on some of our records. This is a American Vintage, same series, 56 Strat. And I think it's super cool. It's in this white blonde finish, ash body, so you can see the grain of the ash through the finish. It's a super thin lacquer finish, so it's like, you probably can't catch it on the camera, but like where these grain lines are, you can almost see the indentation of the grain. So it's super, super thin finish, which makes it really resonant and feels really alive. Otherwise, completely stock Strat. It does have a 5-way switch here, kind of like a little bit more like a modern Strat. Other than that, completely 50s spec. It's got this super, super thick, what I think they call soft V profile, 7 1/4 radius. This is the fattest Fender neck I've ever felt on any guitar. I've got a 52 Tele as well, and this is a chonker, man. This is a baseball bat of a neck. So it's cool in that way. If you can get down with it, it's so solid in your hands. It is truly a baseball bat feeling neck to me. 50s pickups, all the 50s spec stuff like the American Vintage series has. I think think that the pickups in the 50 Strats, so this is 56, are usually a little bit more overwound, a little bit more bottom-endy, a little bit more full than some of the 60s models, which I think is cool. And I also like the maple board. To me, like, even though I know that Strats used in surf are almost always rosewood boards, to me, I just like the feel of a maple board. I always think that like the most correct, cool thing for a Strat is a maple board to me. So this is the one that I chose. I'm thinking about using it more in Wiped Out. The only reason why I haven't really so far is I'm always afraid that the trem is gonna go out at a show or something. Might even be a little out there. But so because of the trem being so different than the Jag, I'm always a little bit concerned that if I'm really wailing on it at a show, that I'm gonna go out and just really be an awkward spot until the end of the song. So that's guitars. I'm gonna move on to the amp now. Can you see this amp here? So the amp is a deluxe reverb tone master amp. Very specific why I chose this exact model for a few reasons. One, so obviously with surf, if I could have anything and I had a roadie and all this stuff and I had a truck and everything, I would use, and I had all the money in the world, I would use like a dual showman with one of the big 15-inch cabinets, blonde, one of those things. But a more practical choice for me was something more like this size for a few reasons. One is that I live in New York City. We gig in New York City. I don't even own a car, so if you're going to the gig, you're taking this thing, you're jumping in and out of a yellow cab, or you're jumping on the subway with it. Mobility of it is crucial. So if you don't know about the Tone Masters, they're a digital modeling version of the Deluxe Reverb 65 reissue. They've basically taken all of the technology in like a Kemper profiler, put it into an amp, and made it so that every turn on the dial are the exact frequencies and the exact same response, including like the breakup, as the tube version. It's incredible how close these things sound to the real thing. And in fact, because it's digital, there's a few benefits to it. One is that from model to model, they're all going to be exactly the same. You're not going to have that variance that you have with a tube amp, especially the hand-wired ones, where some sound different than others, or depends. Sometimes like it breaks up a little sooner than others on the volume. It's always going to be exactly the same, and it's dialed in to be like the best. They've modeled it after some of the nicest vintage amps in the world. And they've gotten them so close that I'm sure you can find tons of side-by-side comparisons on YouTube. I've watched them. And when you find those things, you'll see some of the best, most trusted ears in music, in gear in the world. Some of the biggest gear reviewers, they've all tested these things out, they've reviewed them. And what I mostly noticed is that in an isolated studio situation, where you're listening to one amp directly after the other, some of the best ears in music cannot tell which one is tube and which one is digital modeling. That's how good it is. And then if you apply that to a real life situation of using it in a gig, it would be literally impossible to tell the difference between one and the other in a live situation where there's drums and bass and maybe not the ideal sound. There would be absolutely no way that anyone can tell the difference between a tube and the tone master in a live situation. So that combined with the lightweight factor is just like, for me, it was the ultimate kind of versatile amp. I like the deluxe reverb specifically because for me, again, it was kind of the perfect size. I live in the city, I'm in an apartment, I can't make too much noise, so also having the attenuator on the back to be able to dial down the wattage from, I believe it's like 22 to 12 to 5 to 1, all the way down to half a watt. For somebody that lives in an apartment building, that's a game changer. So having the ability to do that was definitely something that attracted me to the Tone Master. And yeah, I mean, other than that, everything is sort of just really stock. You know, I just go literally straight from the guitar. I use one of these Fender coil cables, which are also another cool reason-driven thing, is that I want the stage always to be neat and I want them to be easy to travel with. And so that's kind of what are great about these, like your stage, because they coil up, like the stage always looks neat, but you can stretch these up to like 30 feet. And on the small stages that we play, that's usually not a problem. 30 feet is usually completely fine. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. Thank you for letting me sit and talk about my gear, because I don't really have a whole lot of outlets to do so. So if you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching, and get ready for some more Wiped Out tunes. Thank you.